I used to look at my dad and think, that's the man who taught me everything. He was there for every school play, every scraped knee, every birthday. But one day, one test shattered everything, not just for me, but for the man who raised me. I thought I knew who I was. I thought I knew him. As turns out, we were both living a lie. I always thought I had a pretty normal upbringing. I'm 21 now, but this story really starts when I was about 6. That's the age when you start remembering things clearly, the good stuff and the bad. And trust me, back then, my world was full of good stuff. We lived in a quiet suburb outside of Denver. Me, my mom, and my dad, or the man I thought was my dad. Let's call him Dad, because for 18 years, that's exactly what he was. He was the kind of guy who made you pancakes on Saturday mornings and did your science fair project with you, even though you were clearly just the assistant. Every year on my birthday, he'd decorate the whole house with balloons. Even when I was a teenager and pretended I was too cool for it. And you know what? He never treated me like anything less than his entire world. He'd tuck me in at night, even when I was 12 and starting to act grown. He came to every parent-teacher meeting. I remember one time in 9th grade when a group of boys were teasing me about my voice cracking during a presentation, and my dad showed up at school the next day pretending to be my PR agent doing damage control. It was embarrassing as hell, but it also made me laugh harder than I ever had. My mom, she was more reserved, loving, but quiet. She was a nurse who worked long shifts. My dad worked from home as a graphic designer, so he was the one always around. The one who taught me to drive helped with my college applications, cried when I got into NYU. So, yeah, if you had asked me 2 years ago, who's your dad? I wouldn't even blink. I would have said, the guy who knows how I take my coffee and still calls me champ. But if you'd asked me who my biological father was, I would have said, what kind of weird question is that? Because I had no reason at all to doubt the story had been told since birth. According to my parents, they met in their late 20s. My mom had just gotten out of a messy breakup, and Dad came along like this soft-spoken miracle. They met at a bookstore, yeah, seriously, and apparently bonded over a shared love of Vonnegut and caramel lattes. They dated for about a year and got married quickly. Was born less than a year later. The math never seemed off. I never thought to ask too many questions. My mom was always a little guarded about the past, but I figured it was just personal stuff. Who wants to relive old heartbreaks, right? My aunts and uncles, cousins, grandparents, everyone treated me like I was fully, completely part of the family. There was no weirdness, no secrets that I could sense. And I looked like my dad. Sort of. Not identical, but enough. We both had the same crooked smile, the same way of walking with our hands half in our pockets. People would always say, "You're definitely your father's son." So why would I ever question it? I didn't, not until I turned 20, and everything started to unravel. The first thread came loose during Thanksgiving, of all things. We were at my aunt's house, and everyone was doing what they always do, arguing about stuffing recipes, watching football, trying to keep my cousin's toddler from drinking the gravy. At one point, I was helping clear the table with my Aunt Lisa, my mom's sister. She was a little tipsy from the wine, laughing about something, when she looked at me and said, "You know, it's still so crazy how much you look like your mom's ex." I paused. "My mom's what?" She blinked, realizing what she said. "Oh, I mean, her college boyfriend." "I didn't mean anything by it, sweetie. Just that you've got his jawline." "Funny, huh?" She laughed awkwardly and walked away before I could ask more. That moment stuck in my brain like a burr. I kept replaying it over and over in my head. I didn't even know my mom had a college boyfriend, let alone someone that people still remembered and thought I looked like. It could have ended there. I could have brushed it off. But once that seed of doubt was planted, it grew fast and wild. I started noticing little things, like how my mom would change the subject when anything about the past came up, or how my dad never talked about my birth story. He left that to my mom. I even went digging through old photo albums one night when I was home for winter break. I found a few pictures of my mom from college, and one of her with a guy I'd never seen before. He had my exact eyes. No, my eyes. That photo haunted me for weeks. I didn't want to believe what I was starting to feel, because it felt wrong, disloyal, almost cruel. This man had raised me, loved me, protected me. He was my dad. But the thought kept echoing in my head like a whisper I couldn't shut off. What if he's not? I told myself it was paranoia. I told myself it didn't matter. But eventually, I had to know. Because the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface, whether you're ready or not. And I wasn't, not even close. Once that seed of doubt was planted, it took over everything. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake at night, just staring at the ceiling, wondering what if. What if Aunt Lisa wasn't just tipsy and rambling? What if the man in that photo, the one with my eyes, wasn't just a random boyfriend? What if everything I believed about my family was a carefully constructed lie? I didn't want to think like that. Kept trying to convince myself I was overreacting. But at the same time, I couldn't stop digging. It was like a compulsion. I didn't talk to my mom or dad about it, not yet. I didn't want to open that door until I was absolutely sure. So I started small, quiet. I casually asked my mom about her college years over coffee one morning while I was visiting home. "Oh, it was mostly studying and working," she said. "Nothing worth remembering." "Did you date anyone seriously back then?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She hesitated, just for a second, but long enough for me to notice. There was someone. "But it didn't last," she said, waving her hand. "He wasn't important." My stomach twisted a little. She didn't even say his name, and that made it worse. Because if he really didn't matter, why hide him? Why act like he was some footnote? I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the more I looked into things, the more I saw cracks in the story I'd always accepted. I dug deeper, checked old Facebook posts, yearbooks, even messaged one of her old college friends, someone I vaguely remembered meeting when I was a kid. She was polite but confused. "Oh, I always assumed you were Rick's kid," she messaged back. "You look just like him." Rick, that was the name. Rick Morales. Suddenly it wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a pattern, a breadcrumb trail. I couldn't ignore it. Around that same time, something even weirder happened. I was scrolling through Instagram one night, mindlessly, and a suggested profile popped up. I swear it made my heart stop. It was a man named Rick Morales. Private profile, only a few visible posts, but his face. His face looked like mine in a way that made me nauseous. He had the same cheekbones, same hairline, even the same dimple in his left cheek. I clicked on his tagged photos, saw him with a woman, maybe his wife, a teenage daughter, and one picture from a wedding, standing next to someone who looked a lot like my mom, like same dress size and hair curl level of similar. The post was 3 years old. Was it a coincidence? Maybe, but it didn't feel like one. Everything started to feel heavier. My chest ached constantly. I didn't want to eat. My dad would crack jokes with me, ask if I was okay, and I'd nod and smile, but I felt like a traitor, because now I was lying too. There was a moment that pushed me over the edge. We were watching an old home movie together. My dad and I, one of those grainy camcorder tapes from when I was about 3. I was wobbling around in a little Halloween costume, and he was behind the camera, laughing. Could hear how much he loved me in just his voice. At the end of the video, he turned the camera toward himself and said, "That's my boy. I can't believe how lucky I am." I excused myself, went upstairs, and cried like a child. That was the moment I realized I needed to know the truth, even if it broke me, even if it broke him. So I bought a DNA test, not some quick results, sketchy online kit. I went for one of the major brands, the kind people use for ancestry. I didn't tell anyone. I swabbed my cheek in my dorm room like I was committing a crime. I mailed it off, hands shaking. I sat on the edge of my bed for hours afterward, just staring at the shipping confirmation. Every day, I'd check my email 5 times. Every time I saw a new notification, my heart would leap, and then crash. And then one afternoon, it was there. Subject line: "Your DNA results are ready." I just stared at the screen for a while. I could feel my pulse in my neck. My ears were ringing. I sat there, debating if I should even open it. What if it was all just in my head? What if I was blowing up my whole world for nothing? But deep down, I knew I wasn't. I clicked the link, typed in my password, and there it was, under the parent matches section. No match for my father. 0% shared DNA. There was no ambiguity, no soft language, no maybes. The man who raised me, the man who called me champ, who sat through Frozen 17 times when I was a kid, was not my biological father. My world collapsed in that moment. I didn't cry, What? I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the screen, numb. Like someone had just deleted a part of my identity with a single keystroke. Because now I had a new question, one that was even harder to answer. Who was my real father? And what did that make the man I'd loved for 18 years? After reading the results, I sat there in silence for a long, long time. I didn't move, I didn't speak, I didn't even blink, I think. It was like I had stepped out of my body, watching my own life play out on a screen. Watching myself lose something I didn't even know I could lose. A truth I'd clung to my entire life. My dad wasn't my biological father. I kept repeating that sentence in my head, trying to make it feel real. It didn't. Even with the cold clinical numbers on the screen, my brain refused to fully process it. And I wish I could say I stood up dramatically, called my mom, and demanded answers. But I didn't. I closed the tab. Then I shut my laptop and curled into bed like a child. I felt small, alone, like the world had gotten too big all of a sudden. I slept for 14 hours that night. The next morning I woke up hoping it was all a dream, but of course it wasn't. Reality doesn't give you that kind of mercy. And so, I found myself walking through campus in a haze, watching people laugh, go to class, live their lives, all while I felt like I had a secret tattooed across my forehead. I considered not telling anyone. Seriously, I thought maybe I could just pretend I never took the test, that I could bury the truth and move on. But the thing about truth is, once it's out, it doesn't go back in. It just echoes. It whispers in the back of your mind when you're brushing your teeth. It shows up in dreams. It follows you like a shadow. And for me, the whisper turned into a roar every time I saw a picture of my dad. Every time I heard his voice on the phone. Every time he texted me, "Love you, bud." How could I keep this from him? How could I sit there and let him continue believing I was his son when I knew the truth? Worse, what if he already knew? What if he'd known this whole time and had chosen to love me anyway? That question messed me up the most. I started playing out every scenario in my head. Had he suspected something? Had there been fights behind closed doors? Did he stay for me? And what about my mom? Had she lied to both of us? Or just him? Eventually, the mental spiral pushed me to do the one thing I'd been avoiding. I ordered a second DNA test. This time I bought 2 kits, one for me and one for my dad. I told myself I was doing it for closure, clarity, for proof. But deep down, I think I just needed a way to force the truth into the open, because I couldn't keep walking around pretending nothing had changed. I went home the following weekend under the pretense of needing a break from school. My parents were thrilled, of course. My mom made my favorite lasagna. My dad and I stayed up late watching old Star Wars movies like we used to. It was torture. Sitting next to him on the couch, knowing what I knew, I could barely look him in the eye. Every time he called me kiddo, it felt like a punch to the gut. On the second night, I finally worked up the nerve. We were in the garage of all places, going through old boxes because my mom wanted to declutter. Dad pulled out an old trophy I'd won in 5th grade, a spelling bee, and started laughing about how I misspelled caterpillar. I didn't laugh. Instead, I said, "Hey, Dad, can I talk to you about something?" He looked at me with that soft, familiar face, the one that always made me feel safe, and nodded. "Of course. What's up?" I pulled the DNA kit out of my pocket, his brow furrowed. "Is that? Yeah, I already did mine," I said. I think we should check something." He stared at it for a long time. Didn't say anything. I waited. My heart felt like it was trying to claw out of my chest. Finally, he spoke. "You already know, don't you?" It felt like the air got sucked out of the garage. I nodded. He closed his eyes, let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped for years. "I've known since you were 3, he said quietly. Silence. I couldn't speak. He continued, "Your mom and I, we had problems. Before you were born, she had an affair. She told me she was pregnant, and I knew there was a chance you weren't mine, but I loved her. And when I saw you, I loved you." Tears welled up in his eyes. "Mine too. I chose to be your father," he said, "every day." It wasn't about blood for me. I was full-on crying now. Not little tears, the ugly, loud, heart-wrecking kind. I collapsed into his arms like I was 5 again, and he held me, just like he always had. We didn't talk for a long time. We just stood there, holding on to each other like the garage was the only place left in the world. Eventually, I whispered, "Do you know who he is?" He nodded, slowly. "Rick Morales." There it was again. That name felt like a ghost finally stepping out of the shadows. "I didn't want to tell you unless you asked," he said. I thought maybe it didn't matter. Maybe you'd never need to know. And for a long time, he was right. But now I needed to know. Once my dad confirmed the name Rick Morales, it stopped being a theory and became reality. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling, thinking, what happens now? Part of me felt strangely relieved. I wasn't crazy, hadn't imagined the disconnect. I wasn't some paranoid kid chasing shadows, but the other part of me, the bigger part, because I had cracked wide open, because I had two fathers now, one who had loved and raised me, and one who had, donated DNA, disappeared. I didn't know anything about Rick Morales except that he'd once been with my mom, and he might be the reason my entire identity had been kept a secret for 20 years. The next morning, I asked my mom. It was probably the most awkward, emotionally loaded conversation of my life. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her coffee, reading some medical journal like she always did. My dad wasn't around. I sat across from her, and for a minute I just looked at her. Really looked. She seemed smaller than I remembered, tired, fragile in a way I'd never noticed before. "Mom," I said, "we need to talk about Rick Morales." She didn't even flinch. She just closed her magazine slowly and stared at her cup for a moment. Then she said, "So, you know." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I know you had an affair," I said. "I know there's a good chance he's my biological father." She nodded. I took a sip of coffee like she needed something to do with her hands. "I was stupid," she said quietly. "Your dad and I were going through a rough patch. We weren't married yet. Rick was. He's charming, reckless, the complete opposite of your father. I didn't think it would last." She paused. "When I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. Your dad, he didn't ask many questions. He just said, 'We'll figure it out together,' and I let him believe it." "You let me believe it too?" I said, my voice shaking. For 20 years, she closed her eyes, pained. "Because you were happy. You had a father who adored you." What good would it have done to rip that away? I wanted to scream, to cry, to tell her she had no right to make that choice for me. But the truth was, I understood. I didn't forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I understood. "I need to talk to him," I said. She looked up sharply. "Rick? I need to know who he is, what he's like, why he left." Her lips thinned. He didn't want kids. He made that very clear. When I told him I was pregnant, he ghosted, changed his number, moved away. I never heard from him again. He didn't want a son. That hit me like a punch to the ribs. I'd imagined this moment a dozen ways. Dramatic reunions, tearful apologies, maybe even a long-lost sibling surprise. But I hadn't imagined rejection. "He doesn't even know me," I said. "And he made it clear he didn't want to," she said firmly. That should have been enough to stop me. But I told her I wanted to find him anyway. She tried to talk me out of it, said it would reopen wounds, stir up things better left buried. But I had to do it, not for him, for me. A week later, I found his address. Social media did most of the work. He lived about 2 hours away in a small town called Longmont. I stared at the Google Map pin like it was a portal to another world, and then I got in my car and drove. The whole ride, my hands were sweaty on the steering wheel. I practiced what I'd say over and over. "Hi, I think you might be my biological father. Hi, I'm the son you walked away from. Hi, I exist." When I pulled up to his house, a modest single story with a neatly trimmed lawn, I almost turned around. But something kept me rooted to the sidewalk. I rang the bell. The door opened after a few seconds, and there he was, Rick Morales. Older now, graying at the temples. But still, unmistakably me. His eyes landed on mine, and I swear I saw confusion morph into recognition in real time. "Can I help you?" I asked cautiously. My mouth felt like sandpaper. "I think you might be my father," I said, voice cracking. He blinked. I took a slow step back. "Are you Rachel's kid?" There it was, my mother's name. I nodded. He let out a sigh. Not shock, not horror, just resignation. I always wondered, he said quietly. You knew? I asked, stunned. I suspected, but she told me it wasn't mine. And back then, I wasn't ready. I was selfish. There was a long pause. Do you want to come in? I stepped inside. The house was warm. Lived in, smelled like coffee and cedar. We sat in his kitchen, and for the next hour, I got the answers I'd been craving. Yes, he regretted walking away. No, he'd never had other kids. Yes, he had thought about reaching out, but convinced himself it was too late. I didn't think you'd want anything to do with me, he said. I didn't even know you existed, I shot back. He nodded. Took it. Didn't get defensive. And somehow, that made it worse. He wasn't a monster. He was just a broken man who made terrible choices. We didn't hug. There were no tears. But before I left, he asked if we could talk again sometime. I told him, maybe, because I still didn't know how I felt. Not really. But I was glad I went. I needed to see him, to look into the face that made mine and ask the question that had haunted me for months. Why? I finally had my answer. The ride back home after meeting Rick was eerily quiet. No music, no calls. Just the sound of the tires humming over the asphalt and my own breathing. I had come face to face with the man whose DNA was half of mine. And yet I left feeling more connected to a stranger at the gas station than I did to him. It was surreal. I should have felt angry or overwhelmed or something. But instead I felt hollow, like someone had pressed pause on the inside of me. I kept thinking, that's it. That's the guy. And then, like a slap, came the guilt. 'Cause how could I feel more disappointed by the man who gave me life than by the one who had been there for my life every step of the way? That's when it really hit me. Rick may have created me, but Dad, the man who cheered at my middle school plays, who taught me how to parallel park, who showed up to every stupid soccer game, even though I was awful, he had made me who I was. Ass! And I had to talk to him. When I got home that evening, I found him out in the backyard, cleaning the grill. It was one of those quiet suburban scenes that suddenly felt so loaded with meaning, like I was seeing my life from the outside. He looked up as I approached. Hey, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. You okay? I went, I said softly. He didn't need me to say where. He just nodded. How'd it go? I sat on the edge of the patio chair and stared at the sky. We talked. For a while he answered questions. Do you feel better? No, I admitted. I feel sad and guilty. It's like I opened a box I wasn't ready for. He didn't say anything. I turned to him. I don't feel connected to him, not like I thought I would. It was like meeting a shadow. My dad walked over and sat beside me. We were silent for a long time. Then he said, you know, when your mom told me there was a chance you weren't mine, I was hurt. But then I held you for the first time and I knew. I didn't care what biology said. I was your father. I looked at him. Really looked. His eyes were a little watery. You didn't have to stay, I said quietly. No, he agreed, but I wanted to, and I'd do it again 1,000 times. And that broke me. The dam I'd been holding back burst open. I cried in a way I hadn't since I was a child. Full, racking sobs. He pulled me into a hug and held me, like he had so many times before. You're my son, he whispered. Nothing changes that. After I calmed down, we sat out there for what felt like hours. Just two people, tethered by love stronger than DNA. Eventually, my mom joined us. She had that look, the one she wore when she was preparing for bad news. I didn't sugarcoat it. I saw Rick. We talked. She nodded. Did he say anything about me? Not really, I said. He admitted he was selfish. He regrets it, I think, but it's complicated. She exhaled slowly. I'm sorry I lied to you. I know, I said. But that lie shaped my whole life, and now I have to figure out what's real. Her eyes welled up. I thought I was protecting you. Maybe you were, I said. But I still needed the truth. We didn't hug, not right away. There was still a lot between us. But for the first time in weeks, I saw something in her face that made her feel human again. Not the villain, not the liar. just a flawed person who made a terrible choice. We all did. The days that followed were weird. My mom gave me space. My dad, the man who raised me, kept being himself. He didn't treat me differently, didn't tiptoe around me. That helped more than he probably realized. I started therapy soon after. I had to. Too much was tangled in my head. Grief, confusion, betrayal, identity. Talking helped. I also started writing again. Journaling at first, then short stories. It became a kind of therapy in itself. Turning chaos into characters, turning real-life betrayal into fiction I could control. One day my therapist asked me, "What does the word father mean to you now?" I remember saying, "It means choice." Because anyone can be a father biologically. But it takes something else, something rare and fierce, to choose to be a dad every single day, especially when the truth could have shattered everything. I still keep in touch with Rick. Barely. We've exchanged a few messages. He said he wants to try to build something. Maybe we will, or maybe we won't. I'm not rushing it, because here's the truth. Finding out your dad isn't your biological father doesn't erase the memories, doesn't undo the bedtime stories, the late-night talks, the hundreds of packed lunches, doesn't rewrite the love that shaped you. It just rewires how you see the world. And sometimes it reminds you what love really is. It's not in blood, it's in action. It's in showing up, even when you don't have to. It's been just over a year since everything changed. A year since I found out my dad isn't my biological father. A year since I knocked on Rick Morales' door and introduced myself as the son he never wanted. A year since my whole world cracked open and I had to rebuild it from scratch. And now I'm still standing. It hasn't been easy. The aftermath wasn't a single conversation or one dramatic family dinner where everything was wrapped up neatly with hugs and apologies. No, the truth sticks around. It seeps into quiet moments. It reshapes holidays, changes the tone of old memories, makes you question even the most innocent things. Like when I hear my mom laugh at a joke my dad makes, I still wonder if back then, during all the lies, she laughed the same way. Or when I look at baby photos of myself and see how proudly my dad held me, I wonder if part of him was secretly afraid. I'd grow up and disappear once I found out the truth. There's a before and an after now. And living in the after takes effort. But here's what I've learned in this space. In this new version of my life, you don't need shared DNA to share a soul with someone. So I look at the man who raised me and I see someone who made a decision every single day. Didn't stay with my mom out of obligation. He didn't love me because he had to. He chose to, knowing full well that the biology didn't match. That kind of love, it's rare. It's resilient. It's realer than anything I could have asked for. When people ask me now, "Do you still talk to your real dad?" I smile, because I know what they mean. They mean Rick. And yes, I've spoken to him a few more times. We've had coffee, exchanged awkward texts. He's asked to meet again, and I'm thinking about it. But truthfully, I don't feel a bond there. Not yet. Maybe never. He's a man I share some genetic code with. Sure, but we don't share history. We don't share scraped knees and science projects and inside jokes. About how badly I used to sing Bohemian Rhapsody as a kid, I don't resent him anymore. I did for a while. I had every right to. But now I see him for what he is. A flawed human who made a selfish choice in a hard moment. And who now has to live with what that cost him. It got something he never did. The privilege of knowing my father. Really knowing him. It's not because of blood, but because of love. As for my mom, things are complicated. We're rebuilding. There's trust that has to be earned back, and it's not a straight line. Some days, I'm fine. Other days, I look at her and still feel a pang of betrayal, so sharp it catches me mid-sentence. She lied to me, for my entire life. But here's the truth I've had to face. She was scared. She was human. And she made a choice that she thought would keep our family whole. It was the wrong choice, yes, but not one made out of malice. She's trying now. She listens when I need to vent. She never defends what she did, never justifies it, and that helps. I'm learning that healing doesn't always mean forgiving right away. Sometimes it means choosing to move forward, even with the hurt. And I'm doing that. In therapy, we talk a lot about identity, how it forms, how it fractures, and how we rebuild it when the foundation turns out to be a lie. And one thing I keep coming back to is this. I am not the product of one man's mistake or another man's sacrifice. I am the sum of every moment, every lesson, every bedtime story, and every whispered I love you before falling asleep. I am not less because my biology doesn't match the name on my birth certificate. I am more because I know the difference between someone who creates life and someone who gives life. My dad, the man who raised me, gave me everything: his time, his energy, his heart, even his silence when it must have killed him, and now I call him more often. I tell him I love you more than I used to. I don't take his presence for granted anymore. I still have the DNA test results saved in my email. Oh, I don't open it anymore, but I keep it. Not as proof, but as a reminder. A reminder that the truth might hurt, but it will also set you free. It forced me to confront things I never would have faced otherwise. It gave me clarity. And oddly enough, it deepened my gratitude for the man who chose me, for the man who stayed. So if you're listening to this and you've gone through something similar, a DNA shock, family secret, a betrayal that shattered your identity, I want you to know this. You are not broken. You are not your genetics. You're not the lies that were told to protect or manipulate you. You are what you choose to build from the rubble. And me, I'm building a life filled with people who show up. I'm building truth, one honest day at a time. And now, when I look in the mirror, I don't just see a reflection of a man wondering where he comes from. I see both of my fathers. One in my eyes and one in my heart. Now, when I say dad, I don't think of blood. I think of pancakes on Saturdays, terrible dad jokes, and the man who never needed proof to love me like I was his own. Because in every way that matters, I always was.